Bag murmurit fulace, voi cutia son sarace, negetru de tice. Mor son tosta ce bagă, urbe ce mogo purnarace. Sobor son sarar dusre ascenan goa osleamce. Togoia eta, coși sau eta, voi ce corre sucu, mogo pauta. Locato, Mogtaka Melta, Yakoria Mogan, Tanbuk Newta, Wakoy Karache, Morit Pulanche, Yason Sarache, Ketru de Neche, Morson Tosa Chembago, Urbeche Mogo Pulnarache. Sobor son sarar dusre ascenan goa osleamce. Mogtaka melta, Yakoria Mogan, Tanbuk Newta. Wakoy Karache, Morit Pulanche, Kudia son Sarache, Ketru de Neche, Morson Tosa Chembago, Urbeche Mogo Purnarache. Sobor son sarar dusre ascenan goa osleamce. From Goa with love, Goa with love, Goa with love. From Goa with love, Goa with love, Goa with love. From Goa with love, Goa with love.
Enlightenment. Well, what a word. It's got the word light in it. Now you see, the word light can manifest many things, like it can be talked about in many ways, in many symbolic ways, and it's probably the most symbolic word ever used on this planet, light. And enlightenment has been a huge topic, and so has nirvana. And nirvana has been seen as some kind of enlightenment. Now, some people think of it as, or some minds calculate this as gaining knowledge of a certain type. But then we also have AI. So if we already have AI, what knowledge can we get that could bring us enlightenment? Now, the first person that can be spoken about in this space would be Patanjali, because apparently this person is the founder of yoga. So Patanjali, who is the founder of yoga, apparently has mentioned that 7 deep breaths during 1-point concentration meditation can lead you to nirvana, can lead you to enlightenment. Now you see, the idea here is to check out what exactly he's saying in terms of 7 deep breaths. Now, every time everybody would need to meditate, there would be various types of meditations, and one of them is a 1-point concentration meditation, wherein you have your eyes closed and your focus is on one particular point, which is a point of light. Let's say a small point of light, or a star, or a flower. And you think of this imaginatively when you close your eyes and you meditate towards this particular point. This particular point is your entire point of focus as you continue your meditation. So the meditation part is just about breathing and keeping your eyes closed and focusing on this particular point. As it's called one-point concentration meditation, 7 deep breaths during one-point concentration meditation, as said by Patanjali, will lead one to enlightenment. Now, you see, the breaths that they are talking about in this context of yoga is a breath which goes all the way from the bottom of the emptiness of your lung and then filling it up all the way till it fills up all the way, and then releasing it back till it fills out all the air. So this is like a very, very, very deep breath which probably comes after years of practice of meditation. And when you keep on doing this for a long time, it's a type of exercise. We won't call it exercise because that could make it a little bit rigid. But we can call it some type of routine that is just categorized for filling up the lungs and making your breath happen all over again from a very deep point in and a very deep point out. Now, as we know, many of our things in the body and in our minds, the mind which has still not been defined by science, that mind, as well as our brain and our chemistry and our nervous system and everything depends on the breathing that we do. And this is a huge but very simple way of defeating all sorts of stress, including pain, physical pain. Now, as we understand that we are doing this on a very, 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 very casual level, these things probably go more in the background. But let's get back to the story of enlightenment, because this has a story behind it. So there's a story wherein there are some who believe that they have attained enlightenment. Now let's talk about a story which was written by yours truly, but this was a decade ago. And this was about a friend who I met on the beach, technically, but he also happened to be a writer of a book which was rated very highly by many rating websites, even in a spiritual context. And somehow this book held quite a high position for some time. And as life goes on and the world moves on, these things moved on. And right now seems to be a time to just talk about the aspect of the story which has a relation to enlightenment. So here's the story. So he's a gentleman who comes from a family where, for some reason, and because of his upbringing, from the age of 7, he was always practicing one-point concentration meditation. Yeah, so as a child, he kept on doing this practice, and sometime later on in his life, sometime around the age of the late 20s, he was in the Atlantic Ocean working on a ship. And as he was about to retire and go to his cabin and do some meditation before he goes to sleep, or as he goes to his cabin for his time for doing a little bit of meditation for himself, like he was always doing from the age of 7, he goes to his cabin and does his meditation. And as he meditates with this one point and concentrates on it, this point comes closer to him as his eyes are closed and closer, and somehow he goes through the light of this particular point on which he was concentrating. as soon as that happens with him, he feels something and he opens his eyes and he can see a lot of white light around him. Can hardly see the formations of the reality of his cabin around him. And as he told me the story, he says he was not able to talk or converse or have a conversation with anybody. But he did call up his mum, and the only thing he managed to say to her on the phone was, "Mum, you need to meditate." Now, this is when the mum and everybody else around him decided that he would need some attention. And he was brought back from the ship and he was given attention to help him. Because what had happened with him was a phenomenon that he was not able to describe or understand himself. And he was not able to speak clearly. And for some reason he was a little discontent because he was not able to figure out what exactly happened. And that took a little bit of a toll on his peace of mind, to a point where he was not very content with himself. And as he got rid of that job that he had and was into something new for the next few months, things didn't really work out in the objective sense of how they should be working out for a businessman. And that was not giving him that entire peace of mind that he should be living with. But that would have not affected him so much if this incident had not really happened with him. And since this happened with him and he was not able to fathom and figure out what exactly happened, this kept his mind a little bit preoccupied with discontent, let's say. And then one day he walked into a public space where a friend of his was writing a poetry and she was about to enter it into a poetry contest. And he walks up to her and he looks at her and he finds out that she's writing a poem, and he tells her in his discontent space, "That's not really a poetry. It's got nothing to do with poetry. I'll tell you how poetry is written." And he takes a pen and he scribbles down some few lines and he keeps it there and he just walks off. Now this girl who was sitting there and was writing a nice poem for this poetry contest, which was an international poetry contest, reads the poem written by this gentleman, finds it nice, puts it up into the international poetry contest, and it wins a prize internationally. So she gives him a call and she tells him, "Hey, look, this has just happened. Are you really into writing? Do you write things? Are you into writing at all? Like, do you usually write poetry?" And he says, "No, I don't really write poetry. In fact, I don't write anything and I don't really like writing at all. I've never written so much in my life, except for forms that I needed to fill officially." And then he realizes that since his poem has won, let's try this again. So he comes, meets her, and he writes another poem, and they enter it again in a poetry contest. And again, he wins an award for the poetry. Now, this is when he thinks that all his life he has not been able to write. He doesn't really like the concept of writing. So, suddenly, whatever he writes is having a Midas touch. Now, Midas touch is King Midas from the old stories where anything he touched turned into gold. So, this was something that he found out was quite new in his life, and he was not able to realize again what this was all about now, because now suddenly he can write, and not only write, but he can write poetry. So he understands this as his calling, and he feels that maybe he was meant to write at this point in time. And for some reason he sticks with this idea, puts himself into a room and keeps on writing and writing and writing and writing. For about 8 months, till he finally comes out with a book which is 50 poems on the concept of what we all understand is God. So 50 poems on the concept of God, and these have been written in very light language. So everyone who reads these poems can really understand. And this was the book which was finally called Ponder a While, which was finally released into the market, and everybody really liked it, and it was given quite a few rave reviews. And this was the story of this gentleman who had written the book. Now, as we were talking about this story on the beach in Goa, incidentally, where he was visiting, he also happened to be able to be answering a few questions that were put to him, because, as you see, he understood that what had happened with him was, like Patanjali had said, 7 deep breaths of 1-point concentration meditation can lead you to enlightenment or nirvana. That was a phenomenon that actually happened to him because he was already practicing deep breathing and 1-point concentration meditation. And in the casualness of things, he was able to probably manage 7 deep breaths while concentrating on this point. And that is why he went through such an experience where everything was white around him when he opened his eyes. And he was a little bit out of touch, let's say, with the material world and talking about things in the material world. And that's what was not allowing him to communicate very easily, because he was in too much of an aesthetic space at that point in time. And finally, when he finally wrote this book, he felt a lot of relief, because he felt like there was a phenomenon of enlightenment with which he was channelized to write. And this was his calling in this life. And he finally wrote, and he came up with the book, and the book really became famous. So the name of the book is Ponder a While, just for you guys to know. But you see, this is something which has another level to it. Because what he's talking about is enlightenment and understanding enlightenment and what it can bring to you. Now, what if the purpose of your existence, of your life, was written on a piece of paper and kept in a small box on a table right in front of you? And you take this box and you open it and you read the purpose of your existence. So we assume that nobody really knows the purpose of their existence, because nobody has really probably figured it out. And even if they do figure it out, nobody can really see if that is really the purpose of his existence or her existence or not. So imagine it was actually just written and kept in front of you, and you just opened it and you read it and you figured out the purpose of your existence. The question to this author was, when something like this happens to you, what happens next? I mean, you can't cease to exist anymore, like, now that you figured out the purpose of your existence. It's already figured out. So you are still existing, and you are still living, and you are still having a couple of years probably to live your life. So what happens in this sense? How does it work for someone who has already received enlightenment and has already done something for the with the enlightenment channelization of universal powers, and has outputted something into the universe, and it has been very successful? And now what? To think about it, the story is already about a decade old. And coming up with this story was just to manifest the fact that this has actually happened with someone. And this has happened with someone some years ago. So what may have happened to this someone now 10 years later that he has already, according to our readings and understandings and listenings to podcasts like these, we understand that he has received his enlightenment phenomenon casually and randomly about 15 years ago. So what happens for the next 15 years or the next few years of his life? How does it go? And as I asked this question to this author, he puts his hand into the sand and he lifts up his hand and he says, you see, each and every grain of the sand probably doesn't know the purpose of its existence and what's going to happen next, but it does have a role to play. And that's why it's falling down as per the universal scientific law that it has to fall down from your hand when you lift it up, as it slides off your skin and falls back to the other grains of sand. So what he was saying was that although it has been fulfilled from that person's point of view when he has already attained nirvana, it doesn't mean that that is somehow an end of a type, because he still continues to play his role that he is playing in the real world. Maybe his existence gives the chance for another to receive enlightenment. So you see, things are not just individualistically so, because we are of course connected, and the theory of mushrooms can be remembered very fondly in the sense like each of us are like antennae or like mushrooms, humans, and we attract a lot of energies from every side. Of course, things that we are not clear about and things that we probably are not supposed to be clear about, because there are things that happen in the subconscious and then there are things that happen with the conscious mind. So while things happen consciously with someone like the author of this book, as he meets more people in his life who are not as conscious as him, probably, he's able to pass off a little bit of consciousness towards them just by the fact that he has gone through that experience, and hence he's playing his role. It's not really just reaching a particular point and winning a race. Is something which is quite a distorted idea of nirvana or enlightenment, because it can't really be in that sense that once it is done, it's over and there's nothing more beyond. It would still manifest as the person would still continue to live. And if the person would continue to live, you cannot make the practical question as what sense does it make in this particular person's life, because he has already attained nirvana. The thing is, maybe there's a chance that he will attain this type of enlightenment again. And not only that, there is a chance that his very existence will trigger the enlightenment in another person standing next to him for whatever random reason. So as he answered this question to a very satisfactory point, it was a lovely conversation as usual. And I was just observing that maybe bringing it up in another podcast or a talk would enlighten many about the idea of enlightenment and what happens after, and why that really somehow can't be an end. It can be an end of a cycle, like is said in many calendars of humankind. So this is what we know so far, which I'm just putting out, humbly speaking. And as far as the idea of receiving light is concerned, the one thing that we have understood is the sun sets every day. And it does rise again every day. So there will be light again and again and again. And we are not really able to put a figure on the number of enlightenment experiences we may be having in our lifetime. So one thing is for sure, it's not just one enlightenment and that's it. No. The enlightenment continues with more people enlightened around you. Of course, it would make no sense when you are living in a place where you may be the only one having a certain amount of knowledge and the people around you are totally from a different world altogether as far as knowledge is concerned of the context of where you are living. Now, without getting it more complex, the idea of bringing out this story was just to give a little clarity about the idea of yoga and meditation and what the idea of enlightenment and nirvana actually is or means with respect to a particular story, with respect to a particular person who has gone through such an experience. Moving on, something which has also triggered a lot of enlightenment, maybe randomly so, without any type of rigidity of breathing or practicing a certain type of trait, could be music. You see, the fact that music has been a healer is already been scientifically proven. Now, up until now, the enlightenment factor has not yet reached there, except in the context of a ritualistic dance experience like which happens in psytrance parties, which started from this place called Goa, from Goa with Love. There, as the studies say, this ritualistic dance experience of more than about 8 hours can definitely refresh you. Not really making great similarities between the idea of enlightenment altogether that comes from the first story, but it does bring out this idea of spirituality and gives us this moment to think and wonder what is going on around us. Well, when we finish wondering, we can reach this point of listening to some nice music, and this is something which we also need to understand, that where Goa has been known as the birthplace of psytrance music, and now parties all over the world are even being called Goa parties, there is its own culture and dance and its own type of regional music and folk music in Goa, as much as the other states of India, considering that each state has its own type of language. So here's a small idea about how these things get formed with respect to folk dances, for instance. Like the example of a folk dance from this place in Goa, for instance, comes from the fishermen and the fisherwomen community. So the people from the fishing community who live on the coastline, they had to ritualistically do a few activities to catch the fish. Now, why I'm saying the word ritualistically is because they always had to bring out the nets which were kept in the boat. Then they had to spread them out. Then they had to line them up so that they can be put into the sea as they drive it into the sea with their different techniques. And their different techniques involved certain types of routine movements. This is what I'm talking about. The same was for the community which was, for example, in the fields, who were cultivating rice from the paddy fields. And in their ritualistic behavior, they also had to stand in the middle of the paddy as it was down on the ground of all the grains, and they had to kick them around just to see if there were any impurities which they could pick out, any stones or mud or other particles which were not green. And this made them do a particular movement to move the grains. So imagine yourself standing in a whole sea of grains and you move one leg on crossways on the left side and you move the left leg cross on the right side. And you keep on doing this. So it moves the grains and you can actually see what else is there in between these and get these impurities out. So these type of movements which were done routinely finally turned into dance movements, and these manifested as folk dances. Now if you see folk dance studies, they also talk about lines and circles, which are the most common and simplest way of creating dance patterns where there are groups of people, especially where there are couples involved, like a man and a woman, and many men and women, 6 pairs or 5 pairs. Now, depending on the type of activity, there would be these dance movements which have been taken from them, and hence, accordingly, the men would be joined by the women, or they would both do the dance with these routine movements and then move around together in circles and straight lines and go crisscross. And these are the basic patterns of how folk dances were, which are a huge part of Goa. And now, without getting into any folk song or something of that sort, we would be able to understand that as things have gone further, many of these songs from the traditional times have been made into a newer version by the newer kinds. So first we would like to play out maybe 1 or 2 songs which come from the 70s, 80s times. And then immediately after that we would go on to listening to a little newer version of the first ever techno, psytrance, whatever you would like to call it, remix. You know, it's not like a remix, but this was actually a track which was made for the first time with beat music 4x4, sounding more like a techno track. And it was made as the soundtrack of a movie. So there was a movie from Goa in the language Konkani, and the title track of this movie was made in the mainstream music format with violins and cellos and the orchestra, etc. And then there was the first ever remix version of this track with beat music. So that led us to a whole new era of mixing. And just to jump to 2020 onwards, in the recent times, there's much nicer stuff going on with remixes coming around, which have probably not been heard by the Goan people themselves and are quite underground. These things can probably be only heard on SoundCloud, and I don't really think these are out in the market because they've been these underground programs and projects done by artists. And since there's not much belief in gaining money, the idea is just to put out some artistic work.
दिसता तुका खंय तर पयला दिसता
तुझ्या उगडा साक जळा गीते सगट लोक तुका आसता
और दुगडास म्हाका उरोना पूण तू बँडराच्यान आसता.
अरे बाल तुझी मोजा गोवा तिसरा तुझ्याच घरान आसता.
आय देवा परमेश्वर
तुझ्या बाल भुरग्यांक विसर.
सायबा कसलें हें फकाण म्हजो उगडास गेला खंयसर.
फकताल जेब्रा आनी जॉमेट्री आसताच्या तकलेन भितर. कॉलेजीन शिकून शिकून हो घोव म्हजो जाला एबसेंट मायंडेड प्रोफेसर.
फाल्यां सोसियालाक तुवें येवंक जाय. सांग खंयचो विस्तीत घालता.
तुवें विस्तीत केन्ना म्हाका शिवलाय. हांव तो सोदांच साडी न्हेसता. उठना सोसियालाक तुज्या येना वरून म्हाका एके वाटेन सोडटा. मागीर विसरून दुसरे वाटेन बायलांक बोटां लावन खबरो सांगता.
आगो तुवें कावकान दिसोना.
ओडयास गेल्लें कोण जाणा.
पुरो तुजी फकाणां तूं गोवाक पातयना.
वो आपणा उगडा सुरोन्ना मोडोन तोन्ना चेडवां दोडे मोडटा. मागीर ती चेडवां रागान पळयतो सॉरी आपणा बायल सोज मोलो म्हणटा.
आगो तुवें कॉलेजीन चेडवांक पळयतकच ऑटोमॅटीक हो शेंगोडटा.
तो तुज्या उगडासाक कितें जालां गाय.
कॉलेजीन बरो उगडास उत्ता. पूण घरा येवन तुजें तोंड पळयतकच म्हजो उगडास पाडा पडटा. काजरा आदी हांव बरो
कोणाक सांगो नाका पुरो.
आदी उगडास म्हाका उरो.
अरे बोंडोला कोणाक पडटा. आमच्या रेस्पेराच्या दिसाक पासून पळय कसली पालां कोता. अनेसो तोयार दाबुलांनी गुरजेन हो म्हाका सेंड झेवियरांक सोदता.
You, what would you do?
something like this.
There
even further than the same set as it grows with anticipation. Haha. Again, you can hear them on SoundCloud, somewhere where they would be able to be heard. I'm not sure if they're going to be releasing anything soon, but they definitely are playing a lot of live sets. So if you are around in Goa or somewhere in the universe where you would like to listen to them, it would be nice to write in and maybe we can actually fly them over and have a couple of nice gigs around the place. But if that's not supposed to be part of the plan, then the plan can definitely be from Goa with Love, which is where you will find these musicians, and there's some new music which they will be creating themselves. Something which finally ends up in something like sounding something like this. But of course, this has been released some time back. But more on these lines can be expected. Piece of music. Like this you can tune in always when it comes to live or electronic. And now in the new Goa sound, it's electronic live. again about the conscious minds and where these sounds can be coming from. This is coming from a place called Goa. And as for someone who's tuning in right now, we're going to be probably playing a little bit of what we've been doing in Goa for some time, which is a lot of jam sessions. And these have been bringing a lot of musicians together. Coming from the story of Elvis, like was mentioned before, we have now these jam sessions all over Goa, and it would be nice to look out for them because there are new bands coming over to Goa and they keep jamming with the musicians from Goa and newer things get created. Some things which can never be forgotten as well. And sometimes nowadays, when you don't want to forget, you have your phone and videos, and these things remain forever. There's a lot of holding on the phone. I hope there's not enough space, so not much can go on your phone, and you can listen in and tune into more processes live, like a radio show. And in this next bit, we are presenting a little bit of what happened at a place called Little Tiger. It's a small little shack restaurant on the beach in South Goa, where people come together, and so did a couple of musicians. And they had a couple of nice things to have us listen into, like this.